order. And would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming. In case you don't know him, this is Richard Hages, and he is our new board member for a 3-year term. Correct?
I didn't look. I guess.
Well, it is now. Anyway, so we have a full board now. Our president is stuck in Chicago. Let's all hope that he's safe, dodging bullets. Let's see. Item 3 is director announcements and reports. Who wants to do the mutuals? You have anything to report, Peter?
I can just say from Senior Canyon that we've completed all the post-fire paperwork with insurance and FEMA, and now we are moving ahead with developing our 2 new wells that were completed last fall, and when the fire hit, we had to stop everything. So these are 2 hard rock wells, about 400 feet deep, outside the aquifer, that we hope, I mean, it looks like we can supplement our potable water supply with them. The preliminary water reports are really good, and that they're not overwhelmingly productive, but we hope to get 20 to 25% of our demand implemented by that with the 2 new well sources. So we're waiting. The big bottleneck is we need a Edison upgrade, and we are waiting and waiting and waiting on that.
While they're out fixing all the transformers that are close to trees, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've got a long list of things to do, so they've been, responsive, but we just get, we just have to wait, and we'll try to get it accelerated a little bit if we can, since we are a utility serving the public water.
You're not alone. There are other people that are waiting too.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what's happening, and hopefully next time I get to a meeting, I can report that we're actually producing some new water.
Are you, what's your percentage of draw from Casitas?
Right now, I would say it's probably, because we're still producing water out of our canyon, so it has been about, during the hot months, 60% Casitas, 40% of our own production.
Good for you.
And it's amazing, since the fire, our surface production is still around 140, 150 gallons a minute, which we've never seen this before in our history. So who knows, maybe
That's from the hanging well?
from the North Fork, the West Fork, and the tunnel, the 3 surface sources are still producing in late September, which is, we've never seen that before. So,
Wow.
yeah.
We'll ask that, about that from our hydrogeologist. Ojai Water Conservation District.
I don't have much to report. We haven't met since the last meeting of this agency.
That's okay.
Our last meeting, we did discuss, the need for people to be cleaning out culverts before the rainy season, and I urge everyone to remind everyone that when the rainy season comes, there's going to be a lot of sediment moving, so it is good to remind our general public to clear out culverts and waterways as much as we can, so that there's a way for that ash to move downstream.
Thank you. Okay, the next one is for Casitas Municipal Water District. I can report to you that the lake level percentage right now is 31.5. The elevation is 483.38, which from the rate table tells us that there's 75,014 acre feet left in the lake. And you also have on page 3 the Ojai Service Area Report. I'd like to make a correction to the left-hand column at the bottom, mutual number 6. Switch the numbers for the static and dynamic. The static should be 167.3 feet, and the dynamic should be 186.7. I hope that's clear for the record. Basin status report. Jordan, you're up.
City of Ojai.
Pardon?
City of Ojai.
Oh, is there anything from the city of Ojai
No.
credible at all?
No. Other than our grant application and some conversation about a water coordinator for conservation education.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Johnny. Okay, basin status report.
What about the water conservation?
We got that already.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, Emily did it.
What about mine?
Community Facilities District.
That's on page 3.
No,
It's on this list.
directors announced. You got 5 of them now.
And now, well, in the past, Casitas has been reporting it.
Oh, I
Richard
see.
and I did talk about him wanting to report that.
Well, if he wants to do it, let's let him do it. Heck,
He would have
yes.
to.
Well, I just assumed that was the description of me.
It really, well, it might be. Well, from now on, it is, Richard.
Right.
You're going to get to do a report every
Well,
month.
the only thing I have to report is what I learned recently.
Let's put your mic on, okay?
What I learned recently from Casitas is that the Ojai.
Punch the button.
What I learned recently from Casitas, that the Ojai Facilities District Service Area is doing a bang-up job on conservation, because their water demand is way down. And to demonstrate that, just drive through the city, because it really looks like it. That's all I had.
We can also report that our new engineer, Julia Aranda, is doing a bang-up job contracting with lots of contractors to do the repairs that are necessary in the Ojai service area. So you're going to see a lot of construction as well, and repairs. They're really needed. They've been needed for a long time, and they're going to be done. Okay, let's see. Thank you. I'll make a note of that Richard will make the report.
Just a comment. Julia used to work for me when I was at Las Verdenes, so I've known her for a long time, and she's a good engineer, and she'll do good work for you guys.
I've just been amazed at some of the things she's done in a short period of time, and she continues to amaze. All right, now we'll get back to you for the basin status report.
Thank you very much. Really quickly, today is nearing the end of the water year here in Ventura County, so that's something that we always use this as a milestone in the assessment of conditions. And usually about this time, things start plateauing off and then rising as the precipitation increases, demand decreases, and more importantly, the days shorten and the evapotranspiration in the headwaters decreases. Now, with the Thomas Fire, as we heard earlier, there's still a significant amount of burned area up there, and that in addition to creating hazards for debris flows and ash and mud, it's allowing a lot of that surface water to continue to percolate and exfiltrate from the groundwater systems in the bedrock areas, including the Senior Canyon Tunnel area and the springs therewith. So we're seeing surface flow longer into the year than we typically would in a normal year or a year of equivalent low precipitation like we've had. The issue has become, at least through May, was that the fine sediment at the base of effectively all of the creek and river channels has decreased its infiltration capacity, so that water just skirted along the top and much of it escaped to the ocean as opposed to infiltrating. For that grant application, we calculated about 1,500 acre feet of water that escaped and would have otherwise infiltrated based on a conservative number of measurements taken at various locations this spring along the Ventura River. Here in Ojai, it was a little bit shorter-lived escape period through about March. I think around St. Patrick's Day actually was when the infiltration became complete, and we were no longer seeing escaped water under what would be the points of compliance at San Antonio Creek, at Grand Avenue, or Ojai Avenue bridges. That being said, it only was a little bit of water that we got this year anyway, so our basin high was about 182 feet in the spring back in May, the 7th of May, 2018. But today, we're only down 15.6 feet from that high. So our depth to water is now 197.6 feet in the key well area, the Elrod well, automated measurements that we take at 90-minute intervals in that well. That equates roughly to about 60% of basin capacity, or 48,000 acre feet. It's relatively healthy given the period of drought, and as we were measuring some of the wells this past week, some of the well owners remarked, "Wow, I'm surprised it's so high. All I'm hearing is how dry everything is," and we're standing on his green lawn because he's been using that well rather than Casitas water or others that might have been a source. So it's the health of the basin, given the conditions, continues to be relatively good, and we're still seeing daylighting groundwater in the San Antonio Creek on the discharge side, largely coming from the higher elevation perching layers in the city area. So you can still walk along and still see little pools of fish in San Antonio Creek as water is leaving this basin. Now, the difference between the basin and the stratified aquifers is a important point to make, because when we talk about the basin, some people think, oh, it's the OBGMA. That's the basin. Well, yes and no. The OBGMA jurisdiction extends beyond the basin boundaries. The basin boundaries are the alluvial mapped portion of the basin, the 10 square miles or so that we have at ground surface. But the stratification of the system is important because much of the production continues to come from those deeper zones, where at 197.6 feet, we have a 600-foot elevation of the main groundwater body in the Keywell area, but groundwater discharging at 650, 660, 680 feet, much higher elevation from these perched layers that are in the southern and western portion of the basin, but not connected directly to the main producing groundwater body. So that's the story on input or output and storage, and we're all praying for rain right around the corner. Numbers we've seen are, 40% for here and there next week, maybe a dusting. And while that doesn't sound like a very high percentage, if that maintains a low evapotranspiration in the headwaters for the plants that are there and limits the amount of irrigation necessary in the fall, then it's a good thing for everybody, even though we don't see a major uptick in groundwater levels from that. So there we go.
Yeah. Question, Jordan, are you saying that the permeability or the infiltration now at the spreading ground, or the ash is gone, or will that be the first rain? Will we have more down and sealing it off again?
The jury's out on how long it will take to flush out the ash and the fine grain material along San Antonio Creek and other tributary areas and natural infiltration points to the basin. Within the spreading grounds themselves, that is somewhat isolated from that phenomenon, because the immediate few acres that are directly tributary to the spreading grounds were not burned for the most part, and there's not a lot of runoff that reaches them. It's all diverted off of the creek. So as long as the compliant storm comes and goes, and hopefully that takes quite a bit of the fine grain material with it, then when the receding limb of the hydrographs arrive in subsequent storm events, the water hopefully is clearer, and both from a regulatory and permitting standpoint, the county can operate the spreading grounds and divert the quantities of water to which they're permitted to the spreading grounds, which then clarifies further in the ponds or basins themselves before being directly and passively injected into the aquifer system via the passive recharge wells that are the caboose of the spreading grounds project. It's kind of a mouthful, but if you
Everybody
follow
get that? I'll check with you later. I'm
if you
sure I
follow
did.
rain falls from the sky, start there.
Right.
But the idea is that it probably will have some effect on the quantity and timing of recharge artificially via the spreading grounds, but hopefully short-lived.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if we, what's the total capacity of the basin? Is it 83,000?
So we use 80 conservatively.
Okay, and then 60% of 80,
Puts us at 48,000.
48,000. Okay, got to be able to tell the water security page to update with proper data. And we're going to have to start thinking about that correlation between the lake and the basin and conjunctive use. So we'll talk about that when John gets to his report.
Sure. One more thing, if I may add, in our field work associated with collecting the data from the loggers, we noticed that in the Topa Topa well, that is one of the first that we started monitoring, the logger is stuck, and someone severed the direct read cable connection. So much like when we had a similar problem in the Elrod well and Conrose well, we should address that before too long. So I think what we want to do is approach the Munzigs and ask if we can lift up their pump and pull and replace that logger, because that's a key data point that has 5-6 years of data thereon to which we have no access.
You don't want to lose it either.
Until they move. So we might, I might approach them with that. And I'm not sure if we want to create a budget item for that in subsequent months or something like that to get a contractor to lift that pump a little bit so we can get that out and replace that cable.
Perhaps we need to send them a letter begging for access?
But we have the access through the agreement, but we don't want to touch their pump without their full knowledge. And
Sure.
And they may want to pull it anyway for inspection or something to that effect. So it's
Well,
worth a
anyway,
phone
we
call.
can coordinate with them, so let's do it respectfully.
Will do.
Okay, 49,000. All right, I have one card for public comments. Mr. Christopher Sands.
I'm sure I'm misreading it, but I just wanted to understand. This is the GMP, and it's in the section Water Exports from the Basin. And so those of you that don't have it, I'll just read the sentences of my concern. The law mandates the preservation of the groundwater for the common benefit of water users within the basin. Paragraph goes on to say that if there's a surplus, water can be exported. But it sounds as though when there's not a surplus, the water can only be used by the people within the basin. And of course, I know now we're connected with Casitas. And of course, there's a large reservoir within the basin. And how does this statement preclude Casitas from utilizing the basin for water for general distribution?
It's the law. It's in our enabling legislation, and it's in our ordinance. Unless there is a surplus declared, then someone can make application to this agency
Yes.
for use outside the agency. I don't think that will ever happen, Mr. Sands.
Okay. So just to understand completely, unless there's a surplus, Casitas cannot gain access to water from the basin.
They cannot export it. They are, I believe, the only appropriator over the basin, which means they can extract water from the basin and sell it to the Ojai service area.
Yes.
That's all they can do.
Now, the Ojai service area, that's my confusion. Is the Ojai service area defined by the basin?
It is directly overlying the basin.
Okay, well, I think I have my answer then, and it's not what I drove for. Thank
Oh,
you.
don't worry, we're not going to let water go out of the basin.
Well, very good, thanks.
That's all the public comment cards I have. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board on items that are not on the agenda now? Oh, yes. Okay, she's starting to move. Renee Roth.
Sorry. Renee Roth, City of Ojai. I just have a question about how is it going to work where Casitas is extracting water and they're improving the performance of the wells, of the Casitas wells in the Ojai Basin, which wasn't done in the past. So you're able to extract out more water from the Ojai Basin because you've got more efficient wells. How is there going to be an allocation that Casitas is going to be imposing on themselves for how much water can be pumped out of the basin for Ojai customers?
Everybody okay if I answer that?
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay,
And
good.
that's a concern, and that's why we draft, if you look in the groundwater management plan, there's a table, what? Table 3 or it's, and it's, well, we took a stab at trying to figure out how to correlate extractions from the basin and surface water use. And we have utilized the Casitas water efficiency and allocation program, lake levels and capacities, and tried to correlate them to what extractions could be taken in the basin.
Right.
Okay, and there would be. We're going to try to come up with an ordinance so that at the more extreme levels, it would be mandatory for what could be extracted from the basin related to Casitas. So there is going to be conjunctive use between the two agencies, and an agreement has to be developed and agreed upon by both parties. And I think it's doable. We came up with a pretty rough estimate of how to do it. Now we just have to figure out the kinks in it, because when Casitas is reaching 30%, and we have 40% in the basin, how do we make sure that there's an equitable and legal and sensible water use by both agencies? Casitas does want to improve the efficiency of the wells so that the Ojai service area is self-sufficient, so that they don't have to draw on the lake. That's the other part of it. And that's their mandate by the State Water Resources Control Board and the Water Rights Division, that they have the right and the duty to put that water to beneficial use. Mm-hmm. And that's what they will do.
So I guess the question gets back to that. If we know that stage 4 is going to be at this lake level and stage 5 is going to be at this lake level, how does that correlate with the basin being at stage 4 or stage 5 based on how much water is left in the basin? Is there going to be is that what you're just saying? There's
Yes.
going to be a crossover?
Yes, there is, and the devil's in the details. And we haven't got there yet, but we're working toward it.
And to that end, in that table 1 that in the groundwater management plan that Russ mentioned, we do have some relatively absolute thresholds whereby Casitas is in stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Right, I saw
at
that.
some quantification, and the basin also has a correlative zone. So, for example, this year, when we're in the it would be what is stage 4
Right.
for both the basin and the lake. We're targeting a 3,000 acre foot total annual extraction from the
Right.
basin as a whole.
Right.
And as one of the major purveyors and pumpers, the Casitas Facilities District can really target, okay, what percentage are we extracting in a really wet year when it's a 5,000 acre foot extraction? We're somewhere in the 2,500 acre foot, so roughly half of the production. So if they can focus on throttling that back via conservation largely, it's a 1,500 foot target extraction, and that's part of the management and why it has to be adaptive to the conditions.
So
Yeah.
you're looking at total extractions, and is that total going to be rolled out to each individual pumper?
That was what I was just going to say.
Okay.
It may be ambitious, but Jordan tells me it can be done, and we can provide pumpers with an individual pumping extraction regime for those mandatory stages of lake and basin.
Right, and it's a soft allocation rather than a hard and fast one, because we all get along and the basin has its health because of that spirit of cooperation and conservation.
Yeah, and I understand that it can't be hard and fast, but then the other point is, if Casitas is cutting back their allocations of water to ag on the east end, which is what was discussed at the water resources meeting, is that going to impact their allocation so that if they're getting less from Casitas, they could be getting more from the basin?
I don't know yet. We have a lot of work to do
I know.
to
Okay.
iron out all that stuff.
As a farmer, if you have well water, you're using it now and you're not
You bet.
relying on Casitas because of the cost difference.
Yeah,
You know, it's,
and I'm just hoping there's going to be enough water for everybody, and we're going to get lots of rain, but I'm just wondering if all those things are going to be, and I'm sure you are. I'm just asking those questions. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Renee. All right. I believe we're done with public comments. Number 6 is the consent items, which are the minutes from July 26th. And we apologize for not having the minutes for the rest of the meeting because there have been things happening. We have a motion and a second for the consent items. You will probably abstain.
I will abstain. I never got a copy of the minutes, so
Yeah, I'm looking for
I
them.
don't know if anyone has them.
Oh,
We'll have to move it to the next meeting.
let's take it to the next meeting then, okay? All right. Action items, number 7. 7A is the treasurer's report for August 2018, budget spreadsheet and extraction charges by period.
I'd like to make a few observations.
Please, John.
Last meeting, I suggested that I would bring back at this meeting, which actually turns out to be too early, more of a comprehensive look at the budget versus what we did for projections back in the cost of service analysis. And we'll do that this year. I think it'd probably be best to wait until about December when we have all the numbers in. But I think to date, when you look at the current budget actual sheet, this one, some general observations, and I haven't talked to Cece in detail about some. Receipts are up significantly more than we initially budgeted, so I'm not sure why. We'll come back with that. The wellhead fee appears to be, based upon collections to date, will be somewhere around $38,000 to $39,000 when we had projected $45,000. So it's close, but I'm not sure why it's, there's that difference there. Because that's a fixed charge and everybody pays it, but so maybe I missed something on the number of wells. The water use is up, and therefore the revenue coming in from water use is up. Just for an example, as I recall, in 2015-16, extractions were around 3,500 acre feet. For 16-17. they're around 3,500. Well, the estimate was 3,500, but the actual ended up being 3,826 acre feet. And based upon what we've got so far this year, and based upon last year's quarter this time of the year, it looks like we could have extractions of about 4,600. So that's 1,000 acre feet more than 2 years ago. So I think that's substantial, and that's one of the reasons that the extraction charges, I'm sure, are higher than we projected. So we'll know more at the end of this quarter. But our revenues will be, it appears to be certainly hitting the mark, if not over, than we projected. The rent's a little higher, if you notice that on line 17. It's because we moved offices, so we're paying a little more in office rent. The legal services appear to be on target. The hydrologist budget will be under budget for that, based on my discussions with Jordan. And my service fees will certainly be under budget as well for this fiscal year. So, of course, that doesn't mean we'll probably do more next year for some areas, but we're just kind of getting geared up for that right now. So overall, our expenditures are under, our revenues appear to be a little bit over. And so I think we're going to be in pretty good shape financially compared to where we were year and a half, 2 years ago, when things looked pretty bleak and we thought revenues were going to run out of money. And so once we've upped the pump charge and we've addressed implementing a wellhead fee, it seems to be covering current expenses. The one big one that I didn't mention was we had $25,000 budgeted for the groundwater management plan. We spent under 10,000, so that's a big number that, you know, we're under budget on. But depending on what comes out from DWR this year, if they don't accept the alternative and the agency has to deal with developing a groundwater sustainability plan, there's certainly going to have to be some budget established for getting that put together.
Is there an estimated cost for that?
Well, I don't have one. My understanding of what's got to go into it and what some agencies do, and when they hire consultants, I mean, you can spend $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 on an analysis like that. Hopefully, we're not even close, but certainly. But there's a lot of issues related to impacts on the basin and global warming kind of issues you have to address, and so a number of things that we really haven't looked at specifically in the groundwater management plan that's required as part of a groundwater sustainability plan.
When do they expect it, or do we expect to hear from Sacramento?
I heard the end of this year.
Okay.
The problem is we're pushing up on the date for the groundwater sustainability plan for this agency would have to be accomplished by, when did I say? It's 2022, but I think it's, I want to say July. Or no, I think it's January 31st. January 31st. So, you know.
It was a J word anyway.
Yeah, the further the DWR keeps putting off approving or looking at the alternative, giving us feedback, means a shorter time we're going to have if we have to put together a groundwater sustainability.
That was my next question. Do we have any idea how long it takes to do that? Do we have to do the full-blown report?
You know, I don't, Jordan, you have any sense on that?
There's somewhat of a moving target with respect to groundwater sustainability plans and what will be required. As John mentioned, every so often a new requirement comes out. So it's possible that we need to take a look at a new global warming climate model or something like that that would and bracket down precipitation events into a much shorter time step than annually or even quarterly. So it's tough to say, you know, what it would cost and how long it would take to prepare, but our groundwater management plan is close to a functional equivalent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what we may want to do is spruce that up and then issue it relatively quickly for DWR review and see if that cuts the mustard for serving as a groundwater sustainability plan, especially if in the interim we can establish via ordinance some of the triggers and thresholds and other allocation items that would be a requirement of a sustainability plan, or at least be put into one to make it more robust.
With the exception of, who's the, is it, I forget the name of the agency that's pushing so hard for the groundwater dependent ecosystems.
Oh,
Nature Conservancy.
Nature Conservancy. If we are going to have to do a groundwater sustainability plan, they're going to be pushing very hard for that. And I'm wondering whether or not we need to be getting information ready now instead of later.
And part of that, if I may, is the Wildlife Conservation Board grant application, to which OBGMA is effectively an applicant partner. City takes a big lead on that, but of the 26 projects, 21 are completely within the intent, if not the letter, of the groundwater management plan. So I think that, via the partnerships and the authorship, we really put together a plan that someone like the Nature Conservancy would look at that and say, oh, they are addressing these GDEs.
But I don't know how we do that during a sustained drought.
And
Who do you
that's
blame
where-
it on, nature or us?
Well, and that's part of SIGMA recognizing the climatological effects of drought on groundwater versus anthropogenic effects. And that's the demonstration. That's
I
what
could have
we're-
used that word, but it sounded really smart.
Okay. But you understand, the idea is that it's in Ojai especially, climate is the major driver. And when we have the data in the 10-year alternative demonstration to back that up, whether or not it's accepted by the DWR or challenged by another entity, we certainly have that knowledge and have been building that database to demonstrate that at any time.
But looking backwards, we don't have much data for comparison before the drought.
Over the 10-year period, we've certainly collected more, but hindcasting,
Not in a biological
forecast.
sense, though.
That's true.
That's
That's
our,
true.
that's our problem.
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I
We'll
didn't
get
mean to
there.
sidetrack us.
Just the last thing I mentioned, Jordan mentioned the data logger replacement. I suspect we're gonna have enough revenue left over from this budget that we should be able to fund that. I just need an estimate.
Sure.
So-
I'll put together an email for that to you.
Okay. Okay.
Well, if we only spent 10,000 on the groundwater management plan, you have,
Yeah.
what, 15 left?
Yeah, plus other areas, so
Yeah,
we're gonna be okay.
okay.
You might wanna start saving your pennies in case we gotta do a GSP, so.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I just wanted to say that on the treasurer's report, can we change OCB, which was Ojai Community Bank, to BOS, which is Bank of the Sierra? It's just a typo.
Thank you, Emily.
I just did it on my own QuickBooks, so figured.
You're a
Carry it
quick
over.
study. Thank you. All right, where are we on the agenda? We have the treasurer's report, budget spreadsheet, and extraction charges for the period. Are there any more questions? Any more demands? We need a motion and a second.
I'll move.
John moves. And way to jump in there, Richard. We have a motion and a second. Can we call the roll, please?
Director Johnston?
Yes.
Director Hawkins?
Yes.
Director Baggerly?
No, you call the chair last in case he wants to break a tie. Sorry, that's the way it works.
Director
Everywhere.
Avila?
Yes.
Director Felke?
Yes.
Chair Baggerly?
Yes, thank you. Okay, 7B is 2018-19 fiscal year budget ad hoc committee appointment.
We're a little bit late getting this to you. Just so you know, last year's budget essentially came from the 5-year cost analysis. So we have an estimate for this next year. We can just plug that in. I don't think it's a big deal, but certainly the board in the past has taken an opportunity to at least have one meeting and talk about the budget a little bit and making sure you're comfortable with what's going to be brought forward for approval.
Okay, well, let's Let's put Jim on it, because he's not here. No, I'm just kidding. Who would like to be on the ad hoc committee? Two of you can be on it.
I'll do it if no one else wants to.
Richard, thank you. Anybody else?
Jim?
No, but what do you think about Jim? Has he got any time for it?
We could ask him.
Well, that's a good idea. He's good at math.
I expect we'll only need a couple hours. It
Okay.
shouldn't be that long.
Yeah,
Maybe just one
put-
meeting, but.
Let's put Dan on, because he's not here. All right, we'll need a motion and a second to develop the ad hoc committee appointment, unless you want the chair to do it unilaterally.
Go ahead.
Okay, our new fiscal year budget ad hoc committee members are Richard Hages and Dan Breen. I don't think we need a motion.
Yeah, without objection, so ordered.
That's a good one, I'll remember that. Okay, 7C is the general manager work plan. Go ahead, John.
Yes, thank you. The last meeting, you had asked me to come back with an updated work plan and some priority to those items that I had. I know the print's a little small, just try and keep it on one page. But let me tell you my method and my madness on priorities. I don't like to necessarily just do 1 through 10 or whatever. I've used this type of system before where 1 is usually required by some kind of regulation, and then the letter next to it designates a time period, whether it's in the current budget year or it's 2 to 3 years out or 5 years out. In fact, I just added another one because I've got an item in here. It's really well beyond 5 years. But and then C is necessary to accomplish for the goals of the organization. That's an item 2, and then an item 3 would be desire to accomplish but not really necessary. And so I use that kind of rating system to rate each of these things here. I don't necessarily see this as all-inclusive, certainly, but I see these are things that need to get done in a reasonable time period, maybe in the next couple of years. I did put probably more for information. There's a sustainability goals that are to be met by 2042. Now, I don't suspect any of us will be here at that time, at least I don't think I will, but I think it's something, target dates is something I want to keep in front of the board so you're aware when we have to meet these kind of things. So, well, of course, Jordan might be here. That's right.
I'll let you know how it goes.
I might be here.
So these were just some of my thoughts. If the board wants to entertain any additional items to add to the list, I'm comfortable with that, but I wanted to get something to you. And so I can start working on some of this stuff.
Yeah, one thing I would like to see, we only meet once a month, and it seems like we've got a lot of work ahead of us. And in order to get anything accomplished, I think we're going to have a pretty robust agenda so that our hands aren't tied by the Brown Act. We could, we have a plan that has 5 major objectives in it that obviously has a lot of sub-objectives. But if we could agendize those just for discussion, if there's no particular action to be taken, with the action being direct staff or whatever after the final discussion, we could at least have these things on the agenda as things come up, and we can start to actively talk about them, and the community can be involved in those discussions as well without us having to sit back and go, well, we can't talk about that. It's like the conjunctive use issue. It's going to take some lengthy discussion for people to really understand that. So we're not going to do that in one meeting. Mm-hmm. And I think that, that's one that should be on there pretty regularly. John knows how an agenda works, so I think you can figure out what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think I can add that as a project that we'll just list a kind of an overview of the groundwater management plan, goals or something or whatever, and then we can bring that back as a list, what's in that plan, and the board can decide, what do they see as priority and moving forward, getting accomplished quickly. And so we can figure that out. I'll add it to this in a kind of a overview subject, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, just so that, the items are there for discussion. If the public wants to talk about it, or any board member wants to talk about it, we're able to do that. And ultimately, if we come to some conclusion, direct staff to take an action. The other item that I think we may be haunted by is this litigation between Santa Barbara Channel Keeper and City of Ventura. City of Ventura has now included all of us in this. I don't know that the GMA is going to be in any litigation, hopefully, but certainly if this turns into the typical watershed adjudication type action, the data we provide and the actions we take are going to be looked at pretty much by the various parties in this potential lawsuit, and certainly if it comes to that, by the courts. And so I think a lot of the other agencies are handcuffed by not being able to talk about it because they're engaged in a lawsuit. Well, we're not really in that, hopefully, and won't be. We may be able to, my hope is encourage cooperation among all the various parties to this, so that it doesn't come to the kind of decade and a half court battle that some of the other watersheds have had to encounter.
Are you suggesting maybe something as simple as monitoring that litigation? And then
Yeah.
plug ourselves in when we think it's appropriate?
Yes, I think,
Someplace.
maybe monitoring of it so that we have the ability to report on it at a board meeting and have a discussion of any progress that's been made.
Yeah, I think it's kind of incumbent upon us to keep our customers, the pumpers, people that utilize the water, about what's going on, because it's incredibly important. The city of Ventura has asked the court for a physical solution, which can mean adjudication, and we don't want that.
So what things might we do to foster cooperation? Do we meet with the Upper Ventura Water Group in a joint conversation, or?
That's one avenue. I think we should probably put it on the agenda and make a chronology of what's happened so far, what could happen if it goes one way or if it goes the other way, and let our people know what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's important to, there'll be a lot of misinformation out there as usual, but, we could be a vehicle for getting out as many facts as we possibly can, and without doing battle with anyone, we can encourage others to get together and cooperate. So I think we could play a big role in this, because it's potentially very ugly, and my concern, it will put a halt to any progress any of the pumpers or agencies on this watershed are going to take, because there's going to be a fear of investing money in something that may turn out to be not worthy. So
It'd just be ashes and dust, actually. John, I got a complaint about the shading again. Let me ask you about the meter installation and testing program. I was going to bring it up tonight for something for us to do. Our ordinance does say that we are not respecting Sigma's idea that de minimis pumpers or extractors are exempt from most of everything. We would like to have the information available to us on exactly how much water is being extracted. So maybe and we're asking everybody to have a meter, and we would like to have, and we've denied the use of the crop factor so that they will have to get the meter installed. I think we need to have an agenda item about where we are with people having actually installed meters. Does everybody have one? Are we still, are there 15 or 20 people out there that haven't done it? Are we still getting crop factors instead of meter readings and photographs. I think we need to step up our game a little bit about the exact amount of water extraction.
All right, we can do that. This, certainly, I think that's part of all this. The ordinance and a resolution were put together 2 or 3 years ago. There were some dates in it. We didn't meet those target dates. So that's part of updating all this, and I think bringing back that information you've requested will help make a decision about moving forward.
Right.
The question I guess I would have for council, at some point, the ordinance requires everybody to have a meter. But when you look at Sigma says there's a de minimis use and people are not required to have a meter under 2 acre feet.
There's another clause after that, though. It's unless the agency has regulated them prior to.
Right, and so, which we have.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest issue is we haven't had the opportunity to follow up to make sure people are installing when they should.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got it.
Okay.
And the other question mark on that realm is this wellhead fee discrepancy. Are people actually paying? Because you estimated $45,000 and we've only received 23.5. So are people disregarding their wellhead fees? You know, I'd like to see some information about who's paying and who's not. And I've heard rumor that there are people pumping that aren't paying, and that's disturbing. You know, the rest of us shouldn't be shouldering the burden of funding an agency. So
Just keep in mind that the
Again,
report,
hearsay.
I'm sorry, the report you have in front of you tonight only has 3/4 of the year.
yeah,
So the 29,000 or whatever it is,
July.
it's gonna be around another $9,000 or $10,000, but we're still $5,000 or $6,000 short. So I think your question's valid, that we need to, well, why did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, okay.
Good call. What do we need to do for you on this, John?
Well, I would appreciate at least some board approval for what you've got. I'll add these items you've discussed tonight. I don't know if you want to approve it with modifications as discussed. I'll modify it, I'll bring it back, or do you want to just wait till next meeting and approve it at that meeting? It's your choice.
Why don't we just leave it on the agenda and we'll talk about it as needed?
I just want to get some direction so I know to start moving forward on some things.
Oh, you should have started
Okay.
yesterday.
Okay, all right, I'm at fault.
During the budget committee meeting?
Okay, we can do that. We'll bring it back next meeting.
Okay, good. Let's see, what else do we have on the agenda? Oh, 8 is adjournment. We don't need a motion for adjournment. It is now 5:54. We're adjourned.
Mhm.